So good morning, everyone. Can you hear? Well, yeah.
Yes, Geshe, we can hear.
So good morning, and thank you for everyone for coming. For welcome our new director, Nina. And again, thank you for accepting to take the responsibility and to lead the center. And again, thank you everyone who have been giving contributions to the center. And we have a lot of teachers who have helping different talks, different programs, and then most member has supported in different ways as a board member in different times, directors, SPCs, and many different. So again, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone on behalf of the whole member for giving your precious time, your skills, your resource in order to provide a space for those who are interested in this particular path. So yeah, so it was good to see people coming to show that and also I think for Matthew for being an interim directors when we were unable to find find a director, and of course also as a board member for a long time. And then of course Venerable Tenduk, I think he is the man here. I think he's not just the SPC. I think he had almost two roles or two responsibilities: managing, become like a manager, and SPC, which his job was more as a SPC. But I think during this time, because of so I hope people will step up and offer to support him so that he can have less burden, for the best of everyone, for the center, for him, and for us, so that it doesn't do too much for him. So I hope, and then of course, during those 3 years when we had renovations and a lot of time when center was closed, and even before that, Nancy and Charlene were the board, and they have been working very hard, together with Matthew, and then of course Charlene was the director. In between, we had a speech for 6 months to help. So anyway, I just wanted to take the opportunity to again just to thank everyone for all their contributions and help. Yeah, I think when you're your own job and your own other responsibility, and then trying to run a center like here, which is based on volunteers, non-profit, and when we don't have enough tense. I think sometimes it becomes a little bit too much burden for certain individuals. So my hope and prayer and request is that hopefully more people can extend some more help so that those people who have been taking care, they can have a little bit of less load. And yeah, sometimes it could be just one day coming and opening here, I think probably the director and other management will probably send email or whatever, what volunteer they need where, and hopefully, yeah. So anyway, so thank you again for coming, and we will start as usual. Okay? So just make yourself relaxed, comfortable. And try to let go of any tensions, stiffness in body and mind for a moment. And just focus on the breath. Watching it mindfully and being aware as you breathe in and out. And then try to generate good intention, motivation for being here. And us here coming together, listening, discussion, reflecting, contemplating. May all of this become help and benefit to reduce and eliminate our delusional pride or ego. Much desire. Or, anger or ill will feelings, negative, basically all the negative feeling emotion. Which make us unhappy, disturb our mind, peace. And it create tensions with us and others due to those emotions. And that destroy our own peace and others' peace. It doesn't help anyone. Everyone suffers. So the purpose of studying the Dharma, practicing, meditating, is to reduce those negative emotions that create unhappiness in oneself and others. It doesn't help anyone. So, listening to the Dharma, studying, practicing, meditating may all become cause and condition to be able to reduce those negative emotions. And to cultivate and improve the positive state of minds. Such as patience, forgiveness, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, so forth. May it become cause and conditions to actualize our highest potential, fully awakened state. So we can be not only just temporary help and benefit, but greatest help and benefit. And not only to few, but to each and every sentient being. Even though immediately we might not be able to do that, but may we be able to do that in the future. To be help and benefit even for those who might make our life not so easy. Okay? Divine light into the Buddha, the Dharma, and the supremacy and by the merits I create to listen to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient. Ge Sherab Ge Sonam La Sanju Patu Dani Kapute Dagi Geshe Sonam Dola Pente Sange Duva Ge Sherab Sonam La Sanju Patu Dani Kapute Yeah. Oye, que tiene donde estaba con yo con de también tenía que hacer por también la casa lo. So we have been studying and going through this Atisha's Lama Atisha, and within that, we are in chapter of the great scope, and within that, and we are on chapter on the wisdom chapter, the wisdom path. And last week we went through some of the different reasonings, logics that you find in among some of the early Indian masters. We share Atisha's brought, analyzing the result, whether the result is inherently existing or not, analyzing whether the cause is inherently existing or not, whether the nature itself is inherently existing or not. Through that kind of analyzing, then coming to understanding that, the object itself is empty of inherent nature. The cause of that object is also empty of inherent nature. The result of that object is also empty of inherent nature. And so with the different reasoning and logic, so I think that was where we so then next one, after those, he explained those reasoning logic, then he explained, even though there are many other reasoning logic that you find within the writing of, Nagarjuna's in his many other writings, writing of Aryadeva. Aryadeva was the main disciple of Nagarjuna, writing of Chandrakirtis, writing of Shantidevas, So all these are earlier masters before Atisha came, And so he is saying, even though there are so many different reasoning and logic, not just those three that he just described, but there are many other reasoning and logic you find in them. But he said he's not going to go in much detail in all of that at the moment, because then, it can be lost in that. And here he said he's going to focus more on the meditation practice. So therefore, if you go to the verse number, that we just left last week. Yeah. Where there's number, there's 51, but this one doesn't have it. The reasoning in 70 verses of emptiness. So that is another text by Nagarjuna himself. Okay. And the root verses of middle way, that is also Nagarjuna's own writing. And so forth. The so forth meaning, like in other Nagarjuna's writing, such as Precious Garland and others, as well as Aryadeva, Chandrakirtis, Chandeva, their writings, Explain how it is proven that the nature of all things is empty. So in those different scriptures or texts, they have proved that how all phenomena are empty of inherent nature through many different reasoning and many different logic. Okay. Many different reason and logic it has. Mm. So without going detail, like in Nagarjuna's own other writings, Precious Garland, there is a five-fold analysis with the example of the chariot, and then Chandrakirti add two more reasoning to that, and then it becomes quite well-known, popular sevenfold analysis of the chariot. How nowadays maybe we can use car. At that time I was the chariot. How so those seven analyses at the end, then so-called the car is merely imputed as a car on the basis of collections of parts and things. Similarly, all the things are, all phenomena are like that. How everything is merely imputed on the basis of collection of its parts, and nothing can exist by itself on its own side. So that's and one of the other reasoning that I wanted to talk a little bit. Is the reasoning of known as king of the reasoning, dependent arising. And sometimes when you read Nagarjuna's writing, a lot of time people might not be aware that the dependent arising, one of the main reasons, even though you don't see very often in his writing, because mostly you see the negation part, and for a reason that he does, he focus more on that negation part. And so understanding emptiness from the point of view or from the reasoning of dependent arising, okay? How things do not exist inherently or independently, because everything is dependent arising. Because everything is dependent arising. So understanding the meaning of emptiness as a dependent arising, and understanding dependent arising, meaning of dependent arising from the point of view of emptiness. So there is no, so, and if we understand emptiness from the point of view of dependent arising, then there's less danger of falling into nihilism, where you think that nothing exists. Because last time we discussed about non-inherent existence, different reasoning, logic, different analysis, and then sometimes people come with caution. Then does that mean there's no, self? Does that mean there's no karma? Does that mean there is no path? Does that mean there is no enlightenment? So then if there is none of that, then what is the point of that, of practicing and so forth? Such cautions arises. Such caution arises individual level now, and such caution has been arising in the past as well. But when you understand from dependent arising point of view, then I think you will not fall into that nihilism. So that is why it is known as king of the reason, because through that you find a middle way, not falling in any of the stream, two extreme. In relation to that, in one of the sutra, requested by Matrepa, that is the name. of the disciple who asked the questions. In Tibetan, I don't know the Sanskrit name, so in that sutra, Buddha said, whatever is produced by depending on other conditions is not produced. Whatever is produced by depending on other conditions is not produced. There is no nature of being produced in that. Whatever is dependent on condition is taught as an emptiness or empty. So here Buddha clearly explained when he talked about emptiness or empty, something that is dependent arising is taught as empty, or not being produced. So you have to understand when you say not being produced and depending on others, it's in contradictions. Do you get it? On one hand, it's saying produced by depending on other conditions, and then next he said not produced. So he's saying whenever he said not produced, not arising, empty of being produced, empty of, he's saying is, that means is not inherently produced, independently produced, because is produced by depending on other conditions. And whoever understands emptiness have peacefulness. And whoever understands, that emptiness, dependent arisings, then he or she will find true inner peace, liberation, nirvana. Similarly, in another sutras requested by the Lodigato, Buddha said, whoever put effort on dependent arising, there's no nature of inherent productions. So again, similarly in that, whatever is dependent arising cannot be existing inherently. And so therefore something that is dependent arising is empty of inherent existence. And since everything is dependent arising, therefore everything is empty of inherent nature. Since everything is dependent arising, therefore everything is empty of inherent nature. Everything is empty of independent nature or inherent nature. And then you, of course, Nagarjuna's, you find in many of his writings, he says, what is the dependent arising? So that is in his precious garland. That is taught as emptiness by the Buddha. Whatever dependent arising is taught as an emptiness. That is imputed by depending, and that is the middle way. That is the middle way, because neither is inherently existing, neither is non-existence. Do you get it? So that is the middle way. If it is non-existent, then it falls in one extreme, nihilism. If it is inherently existent, then it falls in another extreme. And so therefore, when you understand something is empty of inherent nature by the reasoning of dependent arising, then you find a middle way. You find a middle way. And that is the right view. That's the right view. And the wisdom that realize that right view is the antidote towards our ignorance and all other delusion that arises from that ignorance. And therefore, that wisdom is the key to achieve freedom from all the delusions and samsara. So in that same, Nagarjuna said, there's no phenomena whatever which is not dependent origin. Therefore, there's no phenomena whatever which is not empty. In here, everything is dependent arising, everything is empty. And when we say everything empty, we shouldn't get stuck to the word. Okay. After explaining everything again, sometimes we get just stuck to this word empty, therefore nothing. Okay. Empty of what? That is always the question we have to ask. Empty of what? You know, whenever you see emptiness, empty of what? And so here we're talking about empty of something, empty of inherent nature, empty of independent nature. That is what it's saying. Okay? Empty of existing by itself, from its own side by itself without depending on other factors. Empty of such nature or entity. Okay. Similarly, in his Root of the Wisdom, Nagarjuna says, whatever dependent arising is free from existing from its own side. Whatever is dependent arising is free or it cannot exist from its own side. Also, same text, he says, whatever arises by depending on others, that is not there for a moment, either is other from that, neither, not either. Therefore, it is no existing or permanent meaning that we experience. Similarly, in Nagarjuna's commentary to Bodhicitta, he says, whatever is arising due to dependency, that cannot exist by its own nature. Sorry, not that one. Those who understand this emptiness of phenomena and also conform the law of karma in its result. That is more amazing than amazing. That is more wondrous than wondrous. So seeing non-contradiction, but actually, because of there is a law of cause and effect, therefore it's empty. Because it's empty, therefore there's a law of cause and effect. And that is, Nagarjuna saying, that is the amazing teaching of the Buddha. On one hand, it's empty at the same time, is dependent arising, therefore there is karma and its result, law of cause and effect. While there's a law of cause and effect, at the same time it's empty. Something beyond our ordinary conceptions, And so, similarly, in Arya Deva's 400 verses, he says, similar, whatever is arising due to dependency, that cannot exist by its own nature. All these are non-existing by its own nature, therefore, there's no self. Similarly, in that same, he says, when dependent arising sin, ignorance is not generated, insight into selfless and nature of phenomena destroy the seed of cyclic existence. Similarly, Lama Tsongkhapa says, whatever depends on condition that is devoid of intrinsic existence, what an excellent instruction can there be, more amazing than this proclamation. Therefore, there's no phenomena exists other than origination through dependence. No phenomena exists other than being devoid of intrinsic existence, you taught. Thanks to the Buddha. So I read few quotations from some of the earliest masters of dependent arisings. So they all are on same understanding. So therefore, let's take for this table, understanding of dependent arising of this table. The table is here and function as a table and is table because, carpenter put together, with his tools, or his or her tools, many different tools, So there is carpenter. Without a carpenter, this table wouldn't be there. Without his tool, he would not be able to put this together. Depend on the tools. The tool was created by someone by getting the material raws, whatever, metals. Those raw materials were mined somewhere and transported by some others. So many by many together, then they create the tools, and the carpenter used the tools to create this table. And where does this tree come from? A forest. And this tree grow in the forest, over the years, decades, or maybe even centuries, by relying on all the clouds, the rain, all the fertilizers, the sun, the heat, everything that is needed. Through all these conditions, through so many causes and conditions, the tree grows. And then someone again cut it with whatever tools, someone transport it, and then it comes, and then another create this table, and then that's how it comes. So that is, this table is dependent arising. This table come into existence as a table, function as a table, not by itself, but by depending on so many conditions, so many causes and conditions. The problem with us is when I see the table, I don't see the carpenter in here. I don't see the rain. I don't see the tree in the forest, the rain, the light, the heat, the fertilizer. That is part of that, all the cause condition that create that. But when we understand deeper understanding of dependent arising that way on experiential level, then when you see the table, you see almost like the whole world in this table, the whole creation of that in here. And when you see that whole creation, you have a different perspective about this table. You relate differently, You treat them very well. You appreciate and treat them well, because so much energy, so much resource, so much cause and condition over so many years is involved there. We wouldn't be just careless, just, oh, I don't like it, just throw it. I don't like the design, I don't like the color, I don't like the shape. And so easily, just throw it away. That is what we do, That is how we hurt the earth. That is how we contribute towards the, the destruction of climate. Sometimes we only complain and, big corporations and so forth for all the disasters. the climate problem. If we don't buy, those corporations will be not selling them. The corporation, if we stop buying unnecessary, who created them? We created them. Someone was recently, complaining about Amazon, but then you buy all, Amazon. And so you are contributing to that, So that is, we are also contributing in our own way, Sometimes we buy so much things, we throw so much things, instead of using as much as, if you see so much energy and time and resource and almost like the whole world in that, as I mentioned, you will have a different perspective and you will treat differently, not just like easily throw it, just like that. So yeah, I was trying to, explaining about the dependent arising of this table in relation to the cause and conditions, So that is trying to not only see is coming from many cause and conditions, but to be able to see everything that we see, every condition phenomena we see, every functioning things we see, any functional object or condition object we see, we have to be able to see all in there, all the cause condition there, If we are able to see, I mentioned you have different perspective, you have different relationship, you have different way of treating the object. Not only is depending arising on the basis of its cause and condition, but also this table, and the same with all condition functioning phenomena. It also depends on its parts. This table is made of many parts, the legs, whatever nails that keep those legs together, and the top, all different parts that make it. And without depending on those parts, the whole table cannot be table, cannot function as a table. So again, the table is dependent arising because it depends on all its parts that make that table. The table cannot exist and function as a table without depending on all parts that make the table. If you take about the legs, if you take the top, if you take the different parts that make it, it is no more table. It can function as a table, and is no more table. It is only table, and it can only function as a table, and it is only table because it can function as table. It's only table by depending on all the parts that make it. So again, that is dependent arising. Because for that table to function and to be table, it has to depend on all parts. Without those parts, it cannot function and it cannot be table. Therefore, this table cannot be inherent existence. Table cannot exist by itself as a table, function as a table by itself, without depending on other conditions, such as the parts. Not only that, the table is stable because, someone at the very beginning and has some thoughts in their mind, creating such objects that can hold cup and all these things. They design in their mind, they come in thoughts, and they started to, create that. Once they create it, then, they give a label, a table. And then that's how then it becomes a table. And from that one, we relate it as a table. If someone asks me to, is the table okay? Then I know what they are talking about. Mm. So the table functions or table exists as a table by putting together all these parts and then putting together it has a certain function. On the basis of that, and there is the mind that label it as a table. And that is how it depends on the mind, the thought that label is a table. If that wasn't the case, before that, if someone asked me, how is the table, I might be wondering what you are talking about. Someone asks you to bring the table, you wouldn't understand what they are talking about. We will not be able to communicate with each other. Because of when suddenly some new things is invaded or created, then the thoughts give an input or label something. And from that on, it is as that object from that on. Before that, no one will be able to relate as that object. And so that is how, how everything is, labeled by the mind, depending on the mind or the concept that is the label. So it is depending on that, the mind, the label, So therefore, the table cannot exist as a table by itself without depending on the level of the mind, that level, or impute. And again, if we talk about, so dependent arising due to cause and condition, and imputed dependence, that's something exists by depending on the thought, the concept, the mind imputing as it is that object. And again, if I want to go a little further to discuss about that, if the table exists as table by itself from its own side, as a table, then it has to function as a table from its own side by itself. And it will be table to everyone who come in contact with that. Is that the case? Is that so? And different beings experience as something else, not as a table. Or some another beings, can it function as something else? Can it be something else and not a table? And can they be also right? Not wrong, but of course they can be wrong. Can they be also right? From Buddhist point of view, I'm going to give one example from the scriptures. whether that might make sense to some, might not make sense because we're talking about something that we cannot see it. But then maybe I will go on more other things. In scriptures, they talk about, this liquid in my cup is some tea. Okay. It seems like tea. To me, it is a tea. But it says to certain beings, like hungry ghosts, they don't experience as a water or tea, they experience something else due to their karma and mind. They see as a blood or pus, and they experience that way. And other beings, Goram, they experience as a nectar. So what is this? Is this water, nectar, or blood? What is that? So if we look from, is neither any of them. For human beings is water or tea. In this one now, for human being is tea. For hungry ghosts is blood and pus. And for God is a nectar. But is neither of them by itself. Is interesting and something to think about. We experience this as a table. Does a bird experience as a table? Does it function as a table, and does it experience a table for the bird, or for let's say, a spider? For spider, what is this? For spider, or ant, or flies, does it function just the way it functions to us? Do they experience that way we experience? No, probably not. So they might experience differently, something, different object, different functioning for them, different things. So what is this? Itself, is stable. We can say we is stable for us human beings. It's not stable for them. And it is something else for them. So what is this? It's neither stable, neither that, by itself. By itself. In relation to we human beings, then it's stable. In relation to another being, it is something else. In relation to another being, it is something else. We all experience differently. We all see differently. It functions differently to all that. And so when you use that kind of analysis on that, so then, the table cannot exist by itself as a table. It depends on many conditions. In these cases, different mind, different karma. Due to our different karma, due to our different mind, things individually we experience differently. And it functions differently to different people or different beings. I think the problem for us is, but when I see the table, there's absolutely table for me is on side. That is the problem. There's absolutely table from the outside. And when someone says it's not table, then we get an argument. I say it's absolutely stable, and the other say it's not stable. And you are ignorance, I'm ignorance. You are wrong, I'm wrong. Maybe we both are not ignorant. Maybe we both are right. You know, because it's neither by itself, it's neither of that. Once you have that understanding, your mind becomes much more open and flexible. When we have this grasping thing to exist from its own side by itself as it is, then your mind becomes very narrow, fixed. This is the only way. This is the only truth. Based on how you feel it, based on how you perceive it, based on how it appeared to you, all of that. Based on your karma, all of that, and then you believe that is the reality, that's the fact, and then our mind becomes so fixed and narrow. On other hand, someone who have a realization of emptiness, who have a realization that nothing exists as that object or by from its own side, but that could be different thing depending on many different factors. How things exist depending on many different factors and conditions, then their mind can be much more open. If I sit there and then hungry ghost says it's past, and if he says past, I wouldn't be so quarreling. You are right and wrong, or another God says nectar. Yes, it is tea or water for me is that, and we all are right in our own way, because it does not exist as itself, any of them. So your mind becomes much more accepting and opening. Your mind becomes much more opening because this is how I feel it, but you might not feel that way. This is how I experience it due to my karma, but due to your karma, you might experience differently. This is how I perceive due to my upbringing, my environment, but maybe that might not be the way you perceive it because of different environment, all of that. Your mind becomes much more understanding, much more embracing. Otherwise, we become, it's all, I'm right and you are wrong. You are ignorant. And everyone feels that way, and that is where we have all this conflict. There's no space for being flexible when you believe that things exist from its own side as it is, and that is the reality. When you believe that everything exists as a table exists as a table by itself, and that is the reality. This water exists as a water, or tea exists as tea from its own side. That's the reality. When you have, then there is no space for being flexible. But when this does not exist from its own side as a tea, as water, this does not exist as table from its own side, then there is all other possibility. There's all other possibility. There's space. There's more space for our mind to be more spacious, more kind of broadening, more inclusive, more understanding. It opened up all these doors. And that is why understanding emptiness becomes so crucial and important. You know, it makes someone's mind, so spacious, so much understanding. Embracing. At the moment, we are unable to do because of that, not understanding that, and this strong grasping of belief how everything exists as it is from its own side. When I see something good, I believe it exists as good from its own side. When I see something bad, and I exist, that badness exists from its own side. That is the reality. That is the bad. That is wrong. All of that. Instead of understanding, maybe, that is not the reality. I see it because of my other condition, me, due to many factors and conditions, not because from the object itself. It's because of my condition, my own karma, my own perceptions, my own different, conditions that make me to feel that way, that make me to see that way, that make me to experience that way. But that might not be the same for everyone. And we cannot force everyone to that because we all have different karma. We all have different condition, different perspective. Mm. Yeah, so, I was giving with it's similarly to, I think, in a commentary the Bodhicitta Nagarjuna give, it's more coming from the mind holy school thoughts about the perception, because they were saying, how external thing does not exist by from its own side, but it's coming from your mind. And so, and then he give examples, same object for one, it might appear to be object of desire. For another, it can appear as object of, for a very strong practitioner, that same object can appear object to be, renounced, not to be attached or desired, but an object to be renounced. And for another being, such as an animal, they might see differently, a food or something. So it's same object, but due to different perception, you see differently. And so that is same when you apply also in, Nagarjuna point of view, similarly, that is similar, same object can appear and same object can received differently by different person, different people, and not necessarily they are wrong. For one is definitely object of desire. For another is absolutely object of renounce, not an object of desire. And another is the object of, something like to eat. So, and same thing, a garbage for someone who is garbage, for another person is not a garbage valuable. Do you get it? So what is that? Is it valuable or garbage? It's neither of them. by itself is neither garbage or useless, or neither is valuable. It depends on who. For someone, it's valuable, very precious. For someone, it's very valuable, very precious object thing. Another person, it can be very unvaluable, useless, like a garbage. So what is that object? Is it still valuable, or from its side is neither? It depends on other factors. The person. So from the object's side itself, that object itself is neither valuable, neither unvaluable. And so if we take that example with every object, that is how it is. We can apply that same analyze to all the phenomena, all the objects. I was giving another example I like to give is, your act of moving your feet, okay? Is it going or coming? When I started to move my feet, that act, is it coming or going? It's neither coming, neither going. It depends which side. From that side is coming, from this side is going. That same act of moving my feet, taking the step. From one side is going, from another side is coming, but the act itself is neither coming, neither going. So I think maybe I've given enough examples, okay, in terms of action, in terms of objects, and also in scriptures, quotations, to make a point, how things do not exist as it is by itself. As it is by itself. Things exist as something by depending on many factors, many conditions, many causes, many factors. That is how things exist as. And so I think maybe that was so dependent arising. So maybe that was the point I'm trying to make. Okay. And so in the next verse, he said, as this text would become too long, if we go in each of those different reasoning logic, it will be too long. I have not elaborated further here. He will not elaborate further here. He gives some example. He went through mainly three reasoning logics, important, and then he gives some quotations from other source, some other reason that you can find in Nagajuna's other writing, like that. But he is not going to go too long here, Atisha. In order to facilitate your meditation, I will fully explain only the established conclusions, So without going details, so he said he's going to just touch on them and conclusions. And once you have that conclusion, then you try to meditate on that conclusions. You do some analysis to lead to certain conclusions. Okay. The whole analyze using different reason and logic is to come to, through that kind of different examination or analyze, you come to certain conclusions. The conclusion here is empty of inherent nature, And sometimes, even though that is the case, sometimes I don't want to, I like to, instead of saying, empty of inherent nature, I like to, personally, because for me, it is more helpful, existing by itself or from its own side. Because sometimes when you see inherent, you feel like there is something else within the object that's no inherent existence, but the object exists from its own side. Sometimes in the way you see it. With all this reason and logic, I know it is not independently existing, it's not inherently existing, but somehow I feel there's cup there, there's tea there, from its own side, up there. How can you deny that? I can pick up the cup and I can use it to drink. Even though with all this reason and logic, even though it makes absolute sense that there's no inherent, there's no independent with all this, but somehow in term when I see the cup, when I think that there is cup from its own side. And that is why I'd like to emphasize more on that, how the cup does not exist as a cup from its own side and giving with different reasons, or this tea does not exist as a tea from its own side or by itself. It's not a tea from by itself or by its own side. It depends on many conditions. And I said, 3 different beings can experience differently and be different for different beings. And if we use that reason for everything, then I think once you understand, then you don't have strong clinging and grasping that this is absolutely that object. If someone experiences differently, you will not be so, panic and, you might see, well, I see differently, but maybe he might see differently. And maybe he or maybe that is what is due to their karma, their perception, due to many conditions, maybe that is what is for them, even though it's not for me. So it does definitely help our mind to be much more, less narrow and fixed. So yeah, I can take a couple of questions if there is question or any comments, anything to share. Yeah.
You mentioned right view. Is that the same right view in the Noble Eightfold Path? Right view. Okay. In the Noble Eightfold Path, there is right view. Is that what you're referring to? Is that the same meaning? Thank you.
The question was from you. Geshe said yes. Hi, oh yeah. This is a question from Lorraine.
Thank you. So I have a background in Western philosophy, which can be in itself problematic. But I'm listening to this relating to what's known as post-structuralism. And also thank you very much for bringing up the table. If anybody's familiar with Bertrand Russell, if you want anybody to elaborate on the table, read the Problems of Philosophy, Problems of Western Philosophy. But post-structuralism, when I was studying that, they kind of go along the same lines as taking apart what we know about an object or know about a thing. And I apologize for not remembering the name of the author, but most people in this part of the world are familiar with a poem called The Jabberwocky. It's a post-structuralism in the way that they take apart words and they create new words that don't really mean anything, but in the structure of the story, you can tell exactly what's going on. And it seems to me that we tend to keep our stories, even if we're taking apart everything about the story, just taking the words apart, we still have a problem with changing our narrative and the way we think about things in our perspective, because even in post-structuralism, they don't take the storyline apart. They don't take the ideology apart. They only take apart the words. And I think, at least for me, I get stuck on that. I get stuck in the details. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. Thank you.
So I don't know Western philosophy and all these details. So but if I will try to talk from Buddhist point of view, there's one understanding, intellectual understanding. What we are doing is now more kind of intellectually, trying to understand intellectually all this reasoning, logic, all this breaking, all of that. But just by intellectually understanding itself is not going to change your story or your mindset. And so we have to go beyond the intellectual understanding to an experiential understanding. And the experiential understanding comes through the meditations. Meditation is the tool. So first you try to study, have the intellectual understanding, but that is not enough to really have a transformations. And that is where also here, the author is saying he explained intellectually why the things do not exist inherently with different reason and logics. Next, he come with the meditations. He said that is the main point. After all this analysis, you come to certain conclusions that there is no inherent existence or there is no things exist from its own side by itself. Now you have to really meditate and contemplate, over and over again until you begin to feel from your heart that things do not exist inherently. That awareness come all the time. Not just here, but every time you see any objects, hear any objects, smell any object, taste any object, touch any object come in your mind, you are aware that whatever is appearing, whatever object is appearing, that it will not exist inherently or by itself. And once you are aware of that, then there is less clinging and grasping to that object. And when you have no more clinging and grasping to the object, that is when the change happens. Due to the clinging and grasping, on the basis believing that there is inherent or there is that whatever object is appear to us, pleasant, unpleasant, good, bad, from its own side, when there is that belief, then then there is different reaction, emotional level, whether it's liking or disliking, attachment or aversion, But once you see, even though there's appearance of that, to my mind, but that's not how it exists. That is not really it exists. There's that awareness in that moment all the time. And because of that, then you don't get a strong grasping and thinking. And when you don't have strong grasping and thinking, then, liking, disliking, attachment, aversion, will not arise. Even it arises, it will not be strong. It will not last long. And so then that is when we started to have some changes in our mind. And so, yeah, so that would be, that is what I can say about it, yeah. As I mentioned, I think last week, in Kamala Shila's, one of the Indian masters that he talked about 3 levels of wisdom: wisdom through hearing or studying, wisdom through reflection, or wisdom through meditation. And there is progress from one wisdom to another wisdom. At the very beginning, you have some understanding and a wisdom based on studies. And then you have to improve more than that. What you have studied, you really have to reflect, contemplate, reflect, that you are convinced and have that conclusion and convince. Once you have that convince or conclusion, then you repeat that practice through meditation again and again until you have that awareness all the time, and that is the way we want to have that awareness. At the moment, maybe when we meditate, put time to take, we might feel that way, but when we are not meditating, once you are out of meditation, then you see, then again, everything is just like normal. Everything exists inherently. There is that person from its own side, that there's a nice object of attachment is on side, you know, and then again we have that disliking, liking, all of that, aversion, attachment, all of that, because in that moment we don't have that awareness. If someone is that awareness, then one wouldn't feel the same way. So yeah, I think maybe that is all I can say. Any others? One more.
Geshe-la, Lorna Hillman on Zoom said, thank you, Geshe-la. This teaching on emptiness, dependent arising has helped me understand it on a deeper level. Others, we all thank you, Geshe-la. Is that? What's your name?
Yes, my name is Reed. With regard to the post-structuralist, I would also, well, it's not just an intellectual pursuit, it's something that's experienced in the body. And two examples I would point out in terms of like, and it isn't just like imagination for imagination's sake, like Jabberwocky, but you can put yourself in a position where you could possibly understand that, or just it in everyday life would come out, i.e. One way I heard it described is like, say you're in a boat and like you fell asleep in the hull and like another boat hits your boat and like maybe punctures a hole or something. You get very angry and, you know, you crawl out of the boat and then you realize, well, the boat that just hit you was empty. And so then maybe that would be sort of an imaginative way that you could understand that like all of this anger, aggression, or road rage or whatever, you know, is coming from your part. And that if, like Geshe says, that if you rest in emptiness or have that in the background, then like something disturbing happens in your life, you don't have to take it so seriously. And then in two, I believe I've read this in two different books, but in two stories where like a Tibetan Rinpoche or Lama is crossing one of these sky bridges, like over between one building and another. And what he said was, you know, he was very afraid because he'd never been over such, but what he came to conclusion is that there's relative truth where, you know, you can feel frightened and sort of be compassionate to that fright. And so he basically came up with the conclusion that, yes, it's real, this fear, and yet, is it true? Then he asked the question, well, is it true ultimately that like, you know, I'm going to fall, or that like, and so to just have both compassion for like, you know, whenever you get angry, well, you're getting angry, that's okay. It's just part of being human. I'll work on that or whatever. But ultimately, you know, the real truth, you could say that emptiness is a way of, it's what gives the great equanimity, because, and therefore a better ability to deal with other people and to not get so excited or depressed or angry or whatever that would detract from, you know, helping yourself and helping others.
Thank you. We'll recite Shantideva's dedication prayer. Thank you, Shayla. Thank you. Shantideva's dedication prayer, please. Thank you, Shayla. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with the mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and may those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.
So have a. Okay, we can do that. So maybe we can do the blessing of the food here. So again, we can try to bless it and make offering to the Guru, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and then take it as a blessing. Oma, 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 Lama, Sanghe, Lama, Geshe Lama, Gendende, Wenje Tepo Lama, we also try to generate the motivation to eat so we can sustain, we can be healthy, so we can practice the Dharma and be beneficial to oneself and others. We also dedicate all the virtues for all sentient beings, especially those who have contributed towards food for us to enjoy directly, indirectly, for all of them to have healthy, happy life and succeed in their spiritual path. In the name of Jesus, in the Buddha Sambhaya Shandopa, and then get about the Tibet and Yawa Shiva in the love. Thank you, bon appetit.